welcome to Wilton Town Talks. I'm your host, Francesco Tomas, here with our guest, Wilton Selectman, Toni Boucher. How are you doing today, Ms. Boucher?
I'm great, Francesco. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Our goal here today is to learn about you, and not only that, learn about the plans for our town. So, I would like to start out, as an Italian-American myself, and you, how was the trip on the boat from Italy to America? Give us the whole story, all the details. Don't hold back.
Oh, I'm delighted to talk to you about that. In fact, I'm writing a book about it. It's almost completed. And there's even a second book coming out of the first one. But yes, I came to America in 1955 as a 5-year-old with my brother, who was 7. We came off of a little family farm. It's kind of like dirt farming in Italy, right in the middle of the country. I call it the Kansas City of Italy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, before I was born, my aunt, who was left behind during the war years, very bad war years, our family farm was overrun by the Nazis and untold hardships were endured until the American soldiers came in and kind of saved the day. So there's a great love of the American soldiers in our family, for sure. But when we were finally able to immigrate, because 2 uncles had already come here, they escaped the war. Unfortunately, my father did not. He unfortunately experienced the very worst of it. But we came in steerage at the bottom of the boat where the poor usually come across. And for me and my mother, we were very sick the entire 14-day trip. It usually takes 7, but the storms were so bad that, so many people got seasick, especially if you're at the bottom of the boat.
Yeah.
But my brother and my father felt really great, and my brother, who was very precocious at the time, was so excited, and he ran throughout the ship, unrolling toilet paper, turning on water, because he had never seen such a thing.
Thought it was a
because we
cruise.
carried water from the river to take it to home. And in fact, he got into so much trouble because he liked to stick his fingers in all the gears in the engine room. So you had a flurry of staff running around trying to catch him, but he had a wonderful experience. And then we came here to Connecticut, where my 2 uncles were both farmers. That was their business. That's all they knew. Because in Italy, the young boys got to go to school, but only to 4th or 5th grade, and the young girls didn't have any education. So my mother had no education, not one day in school. My father, a 4th and 5th grade education. But the one thing that allowed us to succeed was my dad's daily message. Education is everything.
Of course.
It's the way out of poverty. It's the path to freedom. Because when you're uneducated, as he was, illiterate, you do not have the power to really engage in the society around you. You're dependent on everyone else. And so for us, education was so important and actually formed the very reason that I started in politics right here in Wilton when I was asked to be on the Board of Education. And that was back in 1986. And I said, well, what is that? I had a kindergartner, a 3rd grader, and a preschooler at the time. So I quickly learned, and I started to learn what it was to run in an election, to have opposition, and that started a journey of 17 elections with 15 wins, which is pretty good.
There you go.
But my losses were pretty public. In fact, one of them made it to the Washington Post because of how well it went, even with the headwinds against you. And I was lucky in that last election. Not the one for first selectman, which was a big surprise to me. I had planned my life, in politics was over. But I had 14 interns, the most I've ever had in any of the elections. 14, usually 2 or 3. Oh, I had students in high school from the surrounding towns, from Wilton, college students, some of which continued to text me and bring me up to date on what they're doing. That was one of the best experiences I've had in politics, was the students. And they worked really hard. They learned about everything. We went door to door. We went to 8,000 doors in the 6 to 7 towns in the state Senate district, which was really quite a feat for anyone there.
Wow.
And so one good thing about politics, it doesn't matter how old you are. You could be 18 or 90.
Yeah.
In my case, at the time, I was 73 and 72.
Okay.
And so I thought my time had concluded. I was really encouraging new young talent to come forward. Some of my big successes is right here in Wilton. Matt Raimondi, our chair of the Board of Finance, who asked me, how do you get in politics, Toni? So be careful if you ever ask me that, because before you know it, you're going to be in politics doing something. And I encourage everyone to participate.
That's great. So you're saying before how you're starting this book, you're writing this book. What sparked, your creative side to write the book? Like, what drove that?
Well, that's a good question. You know, in public office, I began to have to write a lot. I had to write speeches and presentations and be interviewed and have press releases be made. And I found that I was more and more writing it all myself. And I enjoyed the writing. I especially enjoyed the writing about other people and other things, to explain things. Because when I was very young, I hated writing. I was terrified. I couldn't speak. In fact, from kindergarten to fourth grade, I sat in the back of a classroom. Okay. And I wasn't given any supports because back in those days, they didn't have ESL or bilingual education. So you basically sat there until you could, you know, assimilate it and hearing it. And I finally, by the fourth or fifth grade, I started to learn. And my sixth grade teacher was amazing. There's always a special teacher. And she made me write. And I couldn't do it. And she made me write again. She made me write until I cried. And wow, was that a great lesson for me, because then I started to understand that if you can write, it's an empowerment, that you can speak all you want, but if you write it down, it lasts and people remember it. And so that's what grew my love for writing and in politics. And once I had concluded my time, in fact, I have 124 pages of a speech I did on the opposition to legalizing marijuana back in the Senate. And that could be a book all by itself. In fact, I'm thinking about it. But once my time was concluded, my brother called me up and he said, Toni, my cousin had written 67 pages worth of notes on our family background and what it was like growing up in Italy and coming to America. And he gave me his notes, and then he passed away. And my brother, who is brilliant, he's was 7 when he came here, and he was royally punished for losing sheep, because that's what you did when you were little and uneducated. You gravitated from small animals, you know, up to sheep, and you had to watch them. And he kept looking up into the sky and losing them. But when he came to America, we found that he was precocious. I mean, he could replicate anything he saw as an artist. He picked up the violin and could play the violin. And he was becoming a budding scientist and would read 300 books in the summertime and win Parks and Recreation Awards for how many books he read.
That's great.
He was absolutely amazing and went on to study astrophysics. He became the number 9 top young scientist in high school in America and had college paid for. He's really extraordinary. So when he called me and he said, Toni, if you don't write this book about our family, we're going to die before it gets published. And he kind of shamed me into it. Now, so I started it. And 17 chapters are completed. It's the final part of the book. I am editing up to chapter 13.
Okay.
As I said, another book came from that. And I had a third book in mind after my husband passed away. The details and the business of dying and what you need to do. And again, my fourth book might just be on the long dissertation I did about one of my topics in office. But the first one is really the family history of what it was like to grow up in Italy, what it was like to go through the war years, what it was like to coming to America, and then a woman's journey, really, into education, in business, in politics, and then again, working in the investment field, and then ultimately now being successful enough to become a philanthropist, and that is providing great sums of money to education, to universities. UConn is one of my focus. Georgetown University is another focus. And John Hopkins University Medical Center, in the research that they do. So it's in healthcare, it's in education, and a lot of organizations here locally. So I thought that was my end game, right? Okay. I was going to provide some benefit to education, to students, to medical advancement, and write these books to pass on a lot of the knowledge and information that our family had acquired over the years. And then, surprise, apparently our esteemed first selectman was retiring, and so they were searching for a replacement, and I helped to try to find a younger generation to step forward, and unfortunately no one did step forward. So I agreed to take this on, and surprisingly ended up without an opponent, which was a first, and got a tremendous amount of votes and support. And in the process of doing that, I was able to talk to so many people going door to door, because I believe in that strongly. It's get the information you need directly from the people that you're representing. And I learned a great deal. And right after the election, we even held a get-together with whoever wanted to come and to the library on November the 8th, the day after the election. And I expected 12 or 13 people, and it was 45. And from all parts of our community, those that had been here 40 to 50 years and those that had only been here 4 months. They were young and older, and I asked each one of them to introduce themselves and why they came to Wilton. What did they love about the town? What drew them here? And it was the typical response that drove me back here to this area, and that was the wonderful educational system of which you're a part of, and my family's been the beneficiary of with all 3 of my kids. And they were drawn to the education. And the second area that they were drawn to was the village feel, the feeling of community, the smaller type of village. Many of them have come from the city where it is more densely populated. They like this more suburban feel and a sense of community. And when you want to talk about the soul of a community, because that's come up here and there, the real soul of a community is not all the buildings you put up. It's the people that live there. It's their personality, the welcoming feeling that they have and what they share with other members of the community.
That's great. So right now I'm trying to connect the two. You come from Italy, you go to school, and then what I'm thinking is there's like a gap. So college, how was it? Where did you go? Tell me about that.
Well, I had some extraordinary experiences in high school. That's where I finally blossomed, when I could speak English, I could learn. Another wonderful high school teacher forced me onto the all-male debate team at our high school. Terrified. And I used to be known as a quiet wallflower carrying lots of books. And that forced me to be more comfortable speaking up and debating issues, really important issues. So that really helped my forming that I wanted to go into the Foreign Service, and I thought, and I also had an opportunity to become a Rotary exchange student for a whole year, not a few months, but 12 months. And I was provided an opportunity to go to Argentina for a year. And when I was there, it was quite an extraordinary experience. While I was there, I had to apply to college, and I only applied to one, which my college counselors said you could never get in and your family can't afford it. And I applied just one, American University in Washington, D.C., because I want to be in the Foreign Service. It was even on my application. And I got a notice that I was accepted. And my father did everything he can. He worked 3 jobs every single day to make sure that I was able to go there, because it was a private college and expensive, and my brother had already received a 4-year scholarship for his genius. And so it was easy for him in that way. So I went to American University. I had met a young man, my future husband. I didn't know it at the time in high school. He graduated from college, and then he went into the Air Force, and it was during the Vietnam War era. It was a difficult time to be in the military. And every year, he asked me to marry him. And I was at American University. He would visit, and I remember sitting on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial at night. There's nothing more breathtaking than sitting there, you know, sitting in front of Abraham Lincoln behind you with the lights all on. It was just the 2 of us that night. And he said, "Toni, I'm going to ask you one more time. Would you marry me? I'm going to a difficult place in the middle of the country, out of nowhere, for the Strategic Air Command, and I'm incredibly lonely. Please." And I looked at him and I said, "I could never marry you. I'm Italian and I like to talk, and you're quiet and you don't converse." Well, you would think that he would, be deflated and give up. No. If anything, my future husband was incredibly persistent, and so he did. But what did that mean? It meant I had to leave my adored university, which they were trying hard to get me to continue in a concentration of Spanish, which I'd become really good at, and I was really geared towards going into the Foreign Service. And I had to give that all up, go to a no-name, middle of the country college to finish, because I had 2 more years to go. And I kept weighing that decision, and over a lifetime, it often crossed my mind, did I make the right decision? And when I looked at my 3 kids, my grandkids, and my wonderful husband, who I'd been married to for 50 years, I said, I made the right decision. It was fine. And you know what? Things grew out of that. I got a teaching certificate for Spanish. I only taught it for 1 year when the business sector just really recruited me heavily. And I became a businesswoman for some huge companies. I rose to the top of my profession in them at the same time of raising my children until we moved back to our home state of Connecticut, where I then again shifted, did my public service, Board of Education, Wilton Board of Selectmen, State Board of Education. I was so amazingly honored to be appointed to the State Board of Education in charge of 500,000 children. The 9 of us did that. And then ultimately, as a state rep and a state senator, was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. But at the same time, my children were going to college. I had to step up too, and with my husband, so we could afford it. Remember, we came from nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, my husband came from a dad who was a tool and die maker and a mom who was a nurse. And my dad, of course, was the only one, you know, that had 3 jobs. My mother stayed at home because she couldn't read or write or drive a car. And so at that point, I was introduced to Common Fund, which was in Wilton, an investment firm. And this was an interesting introduction, in fact. And I said to the president, as he was having me tour his building in Wilton as his state rep, I said, I'm going to be leaving the state legislature. I've only been up there a couple of years, but I just got an offer from a large multinational company, and I have to help with my children's education. And he said, you know, I have an idea. You could work part-time for us, and you could work part-time in the legislature. I said, well, that's an interesting proposition. As you could do what you love. And I said, well, what do I know about investments? I'm getting my MBA from UConn, but I'm not heavily into investments. He said, don't worry, you'll get a Series 7. Oh, little did I know what that meant. It's like getting your LSATs and trying to get into law school or medical school. But I did it because I usually, you know, I just tackle whatever is in front of me and learn it. And I did get my Series 7, something called a 63 and a 31 investment brokerage license. And for 22 years, people don't know this, I did 2 jobs. Okay. And we have a part-time legislature in the House and Senate was much more arduous because you have, instead of 2 towns, you have 6 to 8 towns. So I also had to travel on business, but I made every vote and every meeting. So I left with a 100% record on meetings, but sometimes that entailed flying from the West Coast back to Connecticut on my own dime and running up to vote or to have meetings in the legislature. So I had a very, very busy life. And I was prepared to retire, but here I am, you know, as First Selectman of Wilton. And I'm so, you know, appreciative and honored to be given that very rare, think about where I started. Yeah. What a rare opportunity to be that closely involved with your government. You know, I even explored a run for governor for 6 months, and I was taken to D.C. to consider running for Congress. I turned them down flat on the congressional race, but on the exploratory for governor, I decided to drop back and run for state senate again because it was a $10 million, you know, opportunity, and I did not have those kinds of funds to run a serious gubernatorial race. But I had a great experience, got to know everyone in the state. I've been blessed. And the one remaining thing for the political experience was not necessarily the job, but it was the people I met and the relationships that were established that go way beyond politics. And my one advice to anyone that's younger, that's two pieces of advice if you're going to go in politics. Number one, don't take anything personally, even when they attack you personally, because they will. If you're doing your job, you're not going to please everyone. Okay. And number two, the most important advice is relationships. Build good relationships, even with those that don't agree with you, because someday you'll be working together. And it's important in life, it's important in your own family, is to develop and keep good relationships.
That's great to hear. So another thing I'd like to ask you is, what's the day in the life like? You know, you seem very busy. I would just like to know, 9 to 5, what is it, like 9 to 9?
It's supposed to be 8:30 to 4:30 is the hours at Town Hall. Well, those hours are not the hours that you could keep. I've learned in all politics, if you desire to make yourself accessible, it's 24/7, and it always has been for me. You know, Sunday nights, doesn't matter. Someone calls me on a Saturday or in the middle of something. I have, and I give everyone my direct cell phone number. I just do respond. I like to respond personally to people, or at least if I don't have the answer, I can get them in touch with those people that will be able to provide them with an answer. My best friends are the fire chief and the police chief, you know, and the folks in the building department, and the DPW folks that plow your roads. Every day is an interesting day because you never know what new thing will pop up, and how many inquiries you get, or some problems people will present you with, but also good things. Yeah. Not long ago, I got a great visit by the guys at the Kiwanians that want to put up flags on all of our posts for Memorial Day. I was absolutely delighted to hear that, and we got to pass that through. So the day starts as a normal office day, but then it segues into evening meetings, a lot of them. You know, you're in this position, you almost are like the chairperson of your Board of Selectmen, which has 5 members that are elected, which together, collaboratively, we make the decisions for the town together. Okay. And then I'm also chairman of something called the WPCA. What is that? The Water Pollution Control Authority. That is how much sewage is passed through the pipes in our town. It goes to a treatment plant in Norwalk, and all development is dependent on that. Any new buildings you see in town, they will need either new water capacity or additional more water capacity. So we can be restricted, and I've learned a lot about that. Yeah. It's a topic I never knew I was going to become an investment professional, and I never knew I had to become an expert on sewage and water pollution. So it's a new learning all the time. I really like it. I like learning about the various development opportunities we have in town, and the one concern I have is that it also allows you to see exactly what our town buildings look like and what state of repair they're in. The school buildings are our responsibility as well. Like if we're going to build a new school building like Miller Driscoll School, okay. The Board of Selectmen actually have to proceed in that process. And so that's taking up a lot of time too. A lot of good things have happened, but there's also a great number of repairs that need to be addressed. And that's my vision, is that we get our town facilities up to a place of really good repair.
That's great. So you've been here for a good amount of time, kinda.
Yeah.
So
I have.
What's your biggest accomplishment so far?
Gosh.
Yeah.
You mean since December 1?
Since December 1st.
Since December 1st. Well, I think some of them is addressing some major issues with technology. Okay. Our technology infrastructure was antiquated, and now we're working really hard on upgrading it and making it better. We have a new police station that is in the middle of construction, and we had some delays, and we're moving that forward. I feel really good about that. We have a number of other things that we're working on. We're reviewing all of our town properties to see what we need to repair and what we may not need to keep any longer. We're going to be looking at that. And more importantly, you know, bringing our town employees together and our community together. A small little accomplishment.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean a whole lot, but as an Italian to an Italian, I set up a coffee bar right in the little conference room right next to my office. And with the help of one of my dear friends, I brought a Keurig from home, and we brought some hot apple cider.
There you go.
We brought some hot cocoa, some tea, some coffee, some decaf, with a little fridge that was donated to us. And anyone that comes in the door, whether it's the public or our employees, any employee can just stop in, have a cup of coffee, have some biscotti, which I always keep handy on the side, so you can appreciate that.
Of course.
So there's a lot of eating going on there. So you know, people are threatening to have to go on a diet now, but it's okay because you know there's smiles on people's faces, and we put a few candy dishes around every office that has people coming in from the outside, so they feel just a little something, a little more welcome. And it is an open door policy for me. I'll stop everything if we're not in the middle of something super serious. If anyone that stops in, and they have been, that's the beauty of it. People are stopping by to say hello or chat.
That's great to hear. And then, you know, we've talked about your accomplishment, you know, your accomplishment that you had. What's your end accomplishment? What do you want to leave in Wilton? Yeah.
Well, I want the town to continue to enhance its welcoming culture and climate in town. I want everyone to feel valued. I want us to have really good sound growth and expansion while keeping our what has been the gem of our community, which is its character, its smaller village feel, even as larger buildings are going up. I think that's really important, and also to have our infrastructure be brought up to speed, because some of the work environments and offices that we have are subpar and they need to be brought up. So that's a long-term goal, I have to say. By the way, on the legislative front, one of the last remaining things that are still reverberating today was I did a lot of different changes, and I was very intricately involved with different pieces of legislation or law. But the last thing I did in 2017, 2018 was to mandate the teaching of the Holocaust and other genocides in our school system. We became only one of 4 states in the entire country at that time, and it was groundbreaking as such. And one of the nicest awards I ever got was the Israeli flag in a beautiful gas case mounted on an award that I keep in my bedroom, actually, because it's very, very important to me. Our family experienced some of the horror, but not to the extent, of course, that 6 million people systematically they were exterminated during that war. I don't think that's ever been something like that in history. But I felt that that the teaching of this might sensitize to a whole new generation that doesn't know the history to be a little bit more caring and not as thoughtless with different, actions or symbols that might be displayed, oftentimes because they're not educated or know about what transpired back in those days. So that felt really good about that.
All right. Well, it's great talking to you today,
It's great
Ms.
talking to
Boucher.
you. Thank you for conducting this interview and this program. I wish you great success.
Thank you.
We have a lot of interesting people here in our community for you to speak with.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.